Welcome to Life Happens, where Texans come to protect their legacy and prepare for the second half of life. Join your host, attorney Kim Hegwood with Hegwood Law Group, and our weekly guest as we navigate the challenges that emerge as life happens. Now here's your host, Kim Hegwood.
Good morning and welcome to Life Happens with me, Kim Hegwood, and our very special guest today is Loretta Veney. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Kim. I'm delighted to be here.
And yes, I'm super excited. So today we're gonna do some fun things today. And you and I talked before, so we've got a lot of good things to do. But we're gonna talk about moving caregivers from I give up to I got this.
Yes.
Because we know that caregiving is the hardest thing you do. And so you've been doing this for a while, correct?
Phew. Yes. I started speaking, and my first book came out in 2013, being my mom's mom. So I started speaking about 6 months or so after it came out. And so I've been doing it since then.
So what's the greatest lesson that you learned from, caregiving with somebody from dementia and being prepared for, for everything and ready for anything?
Yes. And, it's such a great lesson. I mean, you never know what's going to happen on any day, any hour, really, of this dementia caregiving thing. But if you are as prepared as you can be, that even the things that are outside the ordinary, you don't throw you off as much. And so I wanted that to be my number one takeaway for folks, because I was so unprepared when my mom was diagnosed at 77. And so, it seems like, well, hadn't you thought about it or talked about it? The answer was no. And the reason was my great grandmother lived alone until she was 101, cooked every day, all that kind of stuff. So when my mother was diagnosed at 77, I'm thinking to myself, you mean you're not going to live by yourself till you're 100? So we hadn't talked about anything. The only thing I knew that my mother wanted later in life is to never live with her children. And she made us sign a document that said that. And that was it. We had never driven past places to say, oh, what about that one? And, we hadn't done that. And then that causes lots of problems for families, because then if you don't have a family meeting to discuss all these kinds of things, to look at all the documents, and you as an attorney certainly know that all your documents need to be in order. Well, if you haven't done any of that, that's where the siblings and the family can have these big, disagreements, because they all have different things about what mom or dad might, or spouses might want. And so, but if you do it all up front, you're ready. So I started completely from scratch, because we had not had those discussions. So there I am with no, preparation. And my great grandmother lived to be 2 weeks shy of her 107th birthday.
Wow.
My greatest fear, also falling under the be prepared category, was I was terrified that my mother would outlive my money, because I'm bad in math, but I know there's a whole lot of years between 77 and 100. So It's like, I'm gonna go broke, because you read so many articles about families, particularly adult children, who are caring for older adults who end up going bankrupt trying to care for them.
So early we were, kind of chit-chatting about a lot of things, but one of the things that I found interesting when you were talking was, let's talk about Legos.
Yes.
And so, because that was like, Legos.
I know. And people always say,
that's something my great kids are playing with now,
I know. So the Lego stories is so interesting. So my mom was very frugal with her money, but when I was 5, she bought me my first Lego set. And I think she was just focusing on, being creative. So she didn't buy the sets where you made a car or an airplane. She just bought the box of bricks, so you can build whatever you wanted with your own imagination. Excuse me. So we would sit for hours, Kim. I mean, hours. And, do that. And so Legos were a part of our entire life. And so usually, at the teenage years, when everybody stops talking to their parents, we just kept going. And so if I was mad at a boy, there we were building with the Legos. And if she had a hard day at work, there we were with the Legos. And so Legos were our answer to everything. And I tell people it's so much cheaper than therapy. I mean, it's expensive, but it's cheaper than therapy. So anyway, so we did that our whole life. And then in the car, on that day in 2006 when she was diagnosed. We were driving home and she was, I mean, dead silent. And I kept asking, you know, how do you feel? Because she, of course, was near tears. And I said, how do you feel? What do you think? And she's not saying a word. So at a traffic light, I reach over into my center console and I get my bag of bricks. I don't go anywhere without Lego bricks. I used it through my entire security career. I did tabletop exercises for evacuation plans with little Lego people and Lego police cars and command centers. So it's been my whole life. And people loved it. They hate, you know, people hate drills, fire drills. People hate that. But when you have Lego bricks, they're like, okay, let's play. So the Lego bricks were in my car and she opened the bag and I have this lap thing. And my car, we poured all the Legos out and she started building, just talked about how afraid she was, how, you know, she didn't know what the future was going to hold. And, you know, the Lego has little people, the little minifigures, and she took the head off of one of the Lego minifigures and said her greatest fear was in a few years, she would feel like she lost her head.
Wow.
And I remember thinking to myself, wow. And you know, in the neurologist's office, I had the only thing I could promise her because nobody knows what this was going to be like. So I had promised her that whatever happened, we'd do it together. And so that was a lot of Lego bricks. And then we became really famous. Fast forward to 2014 when she no longer remembered me. So that put a new spin. So I wasn't different relatives over time. And she just couldn't ever think of my name. So she started calling me very nice person. That was my name. And I came all the time. And she said, there's that very nice person. Or here she is, the very nice person. And so when she started to lose words, not just names, we kept going with the Lego bricks. And that seemed to calm that frustration when she couldn't find the word. And so it was one of the few things she didn't throw on the floor when she got mad, when she couldn't say what she was trying to say. So with the Lego, she just kept going. So I had been following for years this methodology created at Lego called Lego Serious Play. And originally it was created around 1999 to help them improve their internal processes. They had this dream of, you know, overtaking Mattel, the Barbie people, as the #1 toy company in the world. And they thought, okay, well, maybe it's something about our processes or whatever. So they kind of spun off this consultancy called Lego Serious Play. And it helps organizations communicate more effectively, to listen more effectively, be a better team, all these kinds of things. So I had watched it for a while and then I thought, okay, let's see if that can help in some way continue the conversations my mom and I have always had with Legos. And so that's, you know, it just kept going. And so not only it was so successful with mom and brought her so much joy, I started doing it with other people. So I went to adult day programs, memory care facilities to do Lego Serious Play with other people. And it was just a hoot and very successful.
Awesome. So, you know, we know that it takes a lot of skill to be dementia caregivers.
Yeah.
And so, but you talk about, you know, in your books and everything about patience and forgiveness. And so tell our listeners a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I'll start with forgiveness because I think forgiveness is required, like, especially at the beginning. You know, I think, you know, all of our family lives have, you know, different twists and turns and secrets and all that kind of stuff. And so I think one of the things that happens is, you know, there are a lot of things said, you know, along the dementia journey that you have to forgive, you know, the person with dementia for. They call you names that are not yours. They hurt your feelings. They accuse you of stealing their stuff, you know, sleeping with the next door neighbor, all things you know you didn't do. But it can be horrible to have say, you stole my purse or my money and I did not. And no need arguing because, you know, you're never going to win that argument. And so the forgiveness piece really is kind of necessary every day. So the first thing I did, you know, you have to forgive anything they've done in the past that made you mad. You kind of start your whole life over from the first day. And our situation very quickly was that my father helped deliver me. I was born at home accidentally because mama thought she had indigestion and I was the indigestion clearly. And so I pop out into my dad's arms, you know, and I was born in a blizzard, a really cool story. And then when the blizzard was over, my dad left and didn't come back. Okay, so I searched for him. That's how I got into the security field. I searched for my dad, you know, my whole teenage lives and as an adult and all. And I eventually found him, but he and I never met. So fast forward to 2011 when my mom could no longer have conversations. My aunt told me the family secret that it was my mother who kept us from having a relationship with our father.
Oh, wow.
Ooh. And I remember falling on the floor and crying and all that. And then I got up because, I'm all she's got. So I just had to accept the fact that I was never going to be able to get my questions answered. What were you thinking? Why would you do that? And it's a long story, but the bottom line was he was gay and he chose the man over her. And that was the whole story. But she never revealed that. And then she forced him to go away because of that, yada, yada. And so you could have handled that differently, but she didn't. And so I don't know the whys and the hows, and I was never going to get it at that thing, but it was devastating. And so I speak at a lot of churches and they want to know about this forgiveness thing. Like, wow, that seems so easy for you to do. Well, I felt like I didn't have a choice. You could be mean to her and all that, but what good would that do? And she wouldn't understand it. So I just had to let that go. But I think the other things we use forgiveness for are caregivers need to forgive themselves almost every day too. So like you go to bed thinking, oh my God, I didn't undo the, unload the dishwasher, or I didn't get mom in the shower today. Okay, well, there's tomorrow. And, is a shower every day really that important when, dementia, especially during COVID, nobody was going out anyway. But, you have to let go of the little things. And then you have to forgive other people for stupid stuff they do. So the neurologist who says crazy things, or you're out at Walmart and, somebody says in the line, why she keep repeating the same thing over and over? And the other person like, shh, and so stupid people say stupid stuff because you never know what behavior is going to occur when you're out. So you have to forgive other people for staring or saying mean things or anything like that. So forgiveness is just a key role to be successful as a caregiver, and lots of it. And so, because if you forgive yourself for a lot of things done and left undone, it helps relieve a lot of the guilt that caregivers have too. So if you practice forgiveness, you can get rid of a lot of that guilt that occurs. And then the patience. My sister and I used to joke that I was going to always, my sister was 9 years older. Today would have been her 72nd birthday. And we used to always joke that I was going to end up with my mother because my sister had zero patience. And so that was never going to work. So I always knew I would end up with mama. So that was a given. But you can increase your level of patience. It is really necessary so that you don't, get to your frustration, boiling point and yell and scream or throw things back and that kind of stuff. And so some people say, well, I've just never been a patient person. Well, there are a couple of things you can do to increase your level of patience. So for example, if you know what most people lose their patience because there's some sort of thing that triggers them. So I say, know your triggers and then build strategies into yourself to help with the trigger. So for example, my trigger was I'm an on-time kind of girl. So I hated when people are late. So when I would drive up to my mom's building when she lived alone and the dementia was progressing. So you come say, okay, mom, I'm here for the doctor's appointment. Come on down. Okay, be right there. 25 minutes later, she's still laid down. So you got to call back. Oh, I forgot. Then she comes. So to get away from that trigger, I built 45 extra minutes in. I would drive to her building, park, get out, go up, get her, come back down. See? And so now you're going to walk out with me. I'm not sitting in the car waiting. Where is she doing? What's she doing? And then yell at her when she comes down. So see, to avoid all that, you just build some strategies to handle that. So I think most of us know what our triggers are. We do. And some people push our little buttons on purpose. So you try to avoid all that. And then, of course, there's the counting to 10 and, but when they're repeating the same thing over and over and over, you got to probably count to 100. And my mother would say, the same thing over and over, like hundreds of times, like most, people. And, the funniest story was from our book, The Being My Mom's Mom. We were in a grocery store line. I have no idea what was going on in the line. It just took forever. And all these people were behind us. And my mother kept asking me the date because at the time I was still allowing her to write checks, when I was there. And so she asked me the date a zillion times, I guess. So when we get to the cash register, now it's finally our turn. And she says one last time, what's the date? And she's getting ready to write it out. And I'm going to answer. But before I can, everybody else in the line yells, it's the 17th. They're just so exasperated with her. And so we're laughing hysterically because we think it's funny. But then as we're leaving, this woman runs up behind us and she's not laughing and she's about to cry. And she said, wow, you have to tell me how you do that. She said, I learned so much from you in that line. She said, do you know how many times your mother asked you to date? And I was like, no. She said, 30 times. You didn't yell or scream or say, shut up, or you just, every time you didn't raise your voice or your tone or anything. How do you do that? And I said, I wasn't trying to, be flippant, but I just said, she's my mom. She asked me a question. I answer it. Now in my head, do I wish she would stop saying that? Of course. But she doesn't, and she can't. She's not doing it on purpose, which is what some adult kids act like. Mama, stop saying that. Like who would do that intentionally, And so she said, wow, she said, I'm so mean to my mom. She said, I just learned so much from you in that line. And, I'm reading the tabloid, papers at the checkout line, so-and-so slept with so-and-so. Then I would just answer it. The 17th, I was doing all kinds of things. And so you make your own way, but it is very possible to build your level of patience, even if you start at zero, and do that because you need a lot of it. Our 16-year journey, such a long time. And if you lose your patience or you hold a grudge over things and can't forgive, you run the risk of dying before the person that you're caring for. And that's just, wasn't an option I was willing to risk.
So Loretta, tell our listeners really quick, because we're running out of time. Tell us the name of the books and how they find them.
So the first book about our journey is Being My Mom's Mom. The title, of course, came from her. And then I have a photo anthology kind of places my husband and I have visited called The Refreshment of the Caregiver Spirit, which has motivational sayings to move caregivers to, I got this. And then we had a coloring book that Mom and I did together for her 90th birthday. That is intergenerational, that allows people to color in or outside the lines. And they can get them from Amazon. And then my website is really easy, lorettaveney.com.
Perfect. Man, it's been such a pleasure. And thank you so much for the books that I got.
Yes.
And so appreciative. And it's been great having you on the show today. And we look forward to having you on the show again.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Life Happens with Kim Hegwood. Be sure to tune in every Thursday at 10 a.m. wherever you listen to your podcast as we navigate through the challenges that emerge as life happens. The content of this podcast does not establish an attorney-client relationship or constitute attorney-client privilege, legal, medical, financial, or any other professional advice.